Hello, this is Nick Holland, Executive Editor for Information Security Media Group. Welcome to today's session entitled Work from Home, Identity and Access Governance and Data Breach Risks, which is hosted by myself, Nick Holland, Executive Editor with ISMG, and Jacqueline Brinkerhoff, Senior Director of Product Marketing with SailPoint. So a little about today's session. While nearly 3/4 of cybersecurity professionals grade their organization's ability to identify and mitigate a cyber attack as above average or superior, nearly half say their organization has been targeted by a spear phishing attack in the last year, and a third say their company was hit by a malware incident. These cyber incidents are the doorway to bigger issues, including data breach. Cybercriminals leverage their target access and credentials to gain access to sensitive information. A big challenge for a majority of security pros is the lack of oversight regarding who has access, should they have access, and what are they doing with it. In addition, identifying which users and identities pose the greatest risks to their organization. You cannot protect what you cannot see. This exclusive webinar showcases new research findings which will address where the biggest gaps in identity and access management are today, the impact of recent cyber attacks, and identity and access governance investment priorities for the coming year. Before we begin, let me tell you a bit about Information Security Media Group. We're a global education and intelligence firm, and we currently publish more than 24 international media sites. Bank Info Security and CU Info Security for financial services, Gov Info Security for the public sector, and Healthcare Info Security for the medical community. And then Info Risk Today about information risk management, Data Breach Today about breach prevention and response, and Careers Info Security. Each of these sites is dedicated to providing education and news regarding information security, but specifically tailored to their vertical sectors. With over 850,000 members registered to our website, we've created a true information source tackling the key issues of interest to our unique audience. So on to housekeeping. If you have any questions for our speakers during the course of this session, please submit them via the chat window on your screen. And if anyone should experience any technical issues while viewing today's webinar, please dial the number on your screen. Dial extension 115, as we do have technical support staff standing by. In addition, I want to emphasize that the content being presented in today's webinar is copyrighted material and is meant for today's session and individual study purposes only. If you or your institution would like to use the information presented in today's session or are looking for customized training education, please contact us. About SailPoint. SailPoint, the leader in identity management, delivers an innovative approach to securing access across the enterprise with the SailPoint predictive identity platform. With SailPoint, enterprises can ensure that everyone and everything has the exact access they need, exactly when they need it, intuitively and automatically. Powered by patented artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies, the SailPoint predictive identity platform is designed to securely accelerate the business while delivering adaptive security, continuous compliance, and improved business efficiency. As an identity pioneer and market leader serving some of the world's most prominent global companies, SailPoint consistently pushes the industry to rethink identity to the benefit of all customers' dynamic business needs. For more information, please visit www.sailpoint.com. About today's speaker, Jacqueline Brinkerhoff is Senior Director of Product Marketing at SailPoint. She possesses over 30 years of high-tech experience in IT management, business productivity, data management, backup and recovery, and cybersecurity. She focuses on driving global product and go-to-market strategies across a wide variety of industries, as well as translating technically complex concepts and making them easy to understand and communicate to a wide variety of audiences. So the agenda for today's webinar: first, we're going to talk through the methodology of the report, then going to move on to the survey results, and then an analysis of the findings with Jacqueline Brinkerhoff. So first, the methodology. This survey was conducted between April and May 2020. The companies represented those with 1,000 plus employees, and over 100 companies participated. So you see from the chart here, North America represented 83% of companies, Europe 12%, and Asia 3%. in terms of the cross-section of companies that were involved, 17% were in technology, 15% in finance and healthcare, 12% in government, 10% in education, 9% in banking. Beyond that, there's a long list of other verticals that we can see on the screen here, but the predominant areas were technology, finance, healthcare, government, education, and banking. So moving on to the survey results. The first part of the research was to assess how cybersecurity professionals saw themselves. We asked them to grade how they saw their organization's ability to identify and mitigate a cyber attack. Collectively, 73% saw themselves as above average or superior in their ability to mitigate a cyber attack, with just 21% considering themselves to be average and 6% below average. No one admitted to be failing. The survey also asked, what do you believe are the top 3 challenges in maintaining cybersecurity across your organization? The top category at 55% was managing the growth in user types, applications, cloud platforms, and data due to digital transformation efforts. Close behind at 46%, IT resources struggle to adequately balance running the business and protecting the business. At 42%, today's threat landscape is evolving too quickly for us to keep pace. And at 35%, employees lack sufficient awareness to protect themselves from socially engineered fraud schemes. Other lesser categories included pervasive shadow IT culture, increasing regulatory requirements, lacking visibility into who has access to what applications, keeping access policies current, and lacking the technology tools to properly detect and respond to attacks in real time. So clearly the emphasis here is on growth in user types, applications, and cloud platforms, IT resources adequately balancing running the business and protecting the business, and the ever-evolving threat landscape. Survey participants were also asked to what degree of confidence they had that the C-level executives and the board of directors for their organization understood the necessary investment in cybersecurity tools to deal with the evolving threat landscape. The significant majority were very confident or confident that C-level executives and the board of directors had their back, with just 16% saying they were neither confident nor unconfident, and only 9% saying unconfident, and 3% saying very unconfident. On a similar question, participants were asked to rate their employees' ability to detect and mitigate cybersecurity attacks. Again, the majority were very confident or confident, but a larger degree of people participating stated they were neither confident nor unconfident, and 12% stating that they were unconfident, representing over a third of companies being somewhat ambivalent or unconfident pertaining to their employees' ability to detect and mitigate cybersecurity threats. They were also asked, has your organization been the victim of any of the following in the past 12 months? Nearly half were subject to a spear phishing attack. 33% stated they were a part of a malware incident, which wasn't ransomware. 29% stated that employee negligence or an insider attack occurred. 19% stated they had a ransomware incident, and 16% stated they had a data breach. Diving into these questions a little further, we talked about what business impacts did your organization experience as a result of these compromises. The top category was employee credentials were compromised at 37%, but also reputational damage was seen as a significant problem, with 22% of companies saying that that had occurred. Further, 10% said financial accounts were breached, 9% had intellectual property breached, and 9% also said they had unflattering media coverage of the incident. In terms of lesser occurrences, litigation at just 4%, the resignation of C-level executives as a result of a data breach or other form of attack is just 3%, and regulatory fines in just 1% of cases. No company stated they had to pay out due to litigation or had a significant decrease in their company stock value as a result of an incident. Also asked of participants was what percentage of your organization's applications, data, and business solutions would you estimate to be deployed on premises, in a private cloud, in a public cloud, or as software as a service? Today, the majority of organizations still have a high degree of their solutions on-premise, as we can see by the dark blue bar, which represents the percentage of on-premise devices. One of the greatest categories further down is 71 to 80%, which is 16% of companies said that they had 71 to 80% of their solutions on-premise. However, as we can see further down, or rather at the top of the chart, there's an abundance of usage of private cloud, public cloud, and software as a service, which are participating for collectively in the region of 1% and 30%. The survey also asked, how confident are you that access policies across your organizations are current? Again, the majority of participants stated that they were considering themselves to be very confident or confident that their access policies were current. Just 19% said that they were neither confident nor unconfident, and 10% stated that they were unconfident. However, this changes a little bit when they were asked about how confident are you that your organization's current security solutions can support your cybersecurity policies and goals. Again, the majority was saying that they were confident or very confident, but there's a significant category in the middle, 33%, stating they were neither confident nor unconfident. And again, 6% saying they were unconfident and 2% saying very unconfident. So again, maybe some indications here that organizations are a little bit more ambivalent about how up to date their security solutions can, or how confident they are that their security solutions can support cybersecurity goals and policies. They were also asked how many different applications a typical worker has access to. The majority of organizations that participated stated that workers typically have somewhere between 6 to 10 applications they have access to. A third of them stated this. Further, 28% stated that they had some inclination that their employees had access to 11 to 15 applications. However, of some concern potentially is that 7% stated that they thought that their employees had access to 16 to 20 different applications, 8% said 21 or more applications, and a rather concerning 9% had literally no idea how many different applications a typical worker has access to. They're also asked, what are the top 3 challenges or risks you're currently facing with managing identities? At the top of the pile, at 56%, was identifying which users and identities pose the greatest risk. Behind that, at 41%, poor management of accounts, including orphaned accounts or over-entitled identities, was seen as a huge challenge. 38% said inconsistent access policies across business units were a challenge. Similarly, 38% stated limited visibility into user access across the organization. Following this, 35% creating and keeping access models and policies up to date. 32% saw that the line of business managers rubber stamping access certifications. 22% said manual password resets or high volumes of help desk tickets. 20% weak passwords and or lack of routine password resets. And 19% demonstrating compliance during audits. Again, just to reiterate, seems to be a significant issue at the top of the pile there with identifying which users and identities pose the greatest risk. The survey also asked what percentage of your workforce was remote prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, what percentage is currently remote today, and what percentage do you expect to remain as remote in the next 18 months? Clearly, over the last few months, there's been a radical shift in terms of people working on site and off site due to the pandemic. We've shifted from, at one point, 54% of organizations stating that just 1 to 10% of employees were remote prior to the pandemic, to a situation during the pandemic of 47% stating that 71 to 100% of employees were remote. What is interesting potentially is the reset for the next 18 months, where there still seems to be a significant percentage of the workforce that will remain remote. 33% of participants said that they expect 31 to 50% of their workforce to remain remote. 26% said 51 to 70% of their workforce they expect to remain remote. We drill down into this a little further. We asked what have been the top 3 greatest challenges with dealing with this increase in remote employees. The highest category was balancing the need for security and operational functionality for remote workers at 59%. Closely following this, educating and training employees on secure remote workplace policies and procedures. At 52%, equipping employees with the requisite IT hardware to remote work. 50% stated that use of personal devices and unsecured home networks to conduct company business. And further down from this, we have managing higher volumes of help desk requests, such as password resets or access issues at 24%. The need to rapidly provision or deprovision access to large groups of employees, 23%. Getting mindshare for cybersecurity initiatives from executive decision makers at 19%. And providing employee ID credentials for access to remote workplace or systems. Again, focusing on the top category, an ongoing need for balancing the need of security and operational functionality for the remote workforce. As maybe a continuation of that point, we also asked how have you had to downgrade or adapt access policies in order to maintain operational functionality for remote employees. 24% of companies surveyed said yes, they had had to do this. We also asked about the use of controlled access to file storage devices such as Box, SharePoint, and Google Drive. We asked, how confident do you feel about your organization's ability to control user access to these file storage capabilities? Again, the majority were confident or very confident they were able to do this. 21% stated they were neither confident nor unconfident, and 8% said unconfident, and 3% very unconfident. Further to this, we asked about securing budget for cybersecurity and what business drivers are most important. Highest category of these was risk reduction at 76%. 67% was improved user and IT productivity and operational efficiency. 66% improved compliance, and 24% a quick return on investment. We also asked, which of the following technologies or controls are you currently using to manage identity and access management practices for employees? By far the highest category was multi-factor authentication, or MFA. 86% of companies stated they're currently using this technology to manage identity and access management. Close behind this was single sign-on at 77%, password management at 68%, remote access solutions at 67%, privileged access management, or PAM, at 51%, identity governance administration, far lower down at 17%, risk-based authentication at 13%, and just 2% stating none of the above. And now we move on to the final part of the conversation, which is analysis of the findings. This will be a question and answer session with Jacqueline Brinkerhoff, Senior Director of Product Marketing at SailPoint. Welcome, Jackie.
Hi, thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me.
So we've gone through the survey results, and obviously there's some interesting findings there. What were your first impressions of the survey findings?
Well, when I looked at the survey, it really is, it's in line with what we've been seeing from our standpoint as well, especially as we've spoken with large enterprise organizations. For some, I'd say pivot is an appropriate word when it comes to how they were able to engage with the work from home orders. But for others, I actually refer to it as more like a hard left turn, since some companies were not necessarily far enough along in their digital transformation efforts to have things like their essential business apps in the cloud ready to respond to the need for their workers to access. So some were actually forced to really accelerate their digital transformation efforts by onboarding applications almost overnight and figuring out then how to provision that access to essential apps to all their workers, including, because these companies are dealing with workers, not only just employees or even contractors, but that extends out to like the partners and the suppliers. I mean, this really had such big impact on their complete supply chain. And what we saw was that they were trying to quickly provision access but while also maintaining productivity. And that was prioritized, was productivity. And unfortunately, I think what we saw in the survey results here kind of conclude with this too, is that security had to take a back seat in some cases as a result to keep productivity moving forward. And what we also saw was that organizations may have only focused on basic access management and authentication, which is great to ensure workers are who they say they are when they're logging in. However, the gap we're noticing was in the way users were getting their access provisioned using basic tools that really doesn't check against policies to see if it's really safe or in line with their role to grant them access. So there's a lot of over-provisioning or over-permissioning that companies need to go back and do some reconciliation to ensure that they're not leaving themselves exposed and leaving that excess permissions out there. And the only other thing that really didn't surprise me about the results was the challenge the respondents said that they're having managing so many user or identity types and gaining deeper level insight and control of who really has access to what, and more importantly, should they, and how is that access being used? So here's my point. Here's the way I'm looking at it. If we look at some of the industry surveys that are out there, I think right now the latest stat is it's about 200 days or just short of that for companies to detect that they've been breached. So it's about 28 weeks to detect. And I did the math, and I believe we're still waiting to see the actual impact this is going to have on enterprise organizations. So if you do the math, if we go from March, where in the US we started to work from home, 200 days puts us around mid to end of September. So we're still kind of watching and waiting to see, what is the aftermath of all of this.
Yeah, I agree that is concerning. So you said that, the results that you've just obviously talked about didn't necessarily surprise you, but what did surprise you, Jackie?
Well, if you look at the figures at first blush, it could seem that these stats are at odds with one another, which could be surprising. But then if we look deeper, it really tells an interesting story that we've been seeing, and that is organizations are feeling like they can do a pretty good job of blocking and tackling the daily arrows, if you want to call them that that cyber criminals are trying to penetrate and gain entry into their network. But when it comes to supporting their cybersecurity policies and goals, such as, let's say, developing a strong security fabric where they have their investments woven together, meaning their security and IT investments together, they seem to be lacking. They have a lot of different point solutions in their environment, but they may not necessarily all be interoperating with one another and talking with one another, which really leaves a gap in this fabric, the security fabric, if you want to think of it that way. The good news is that there are organizations that have been able to crack the nut of this by using identity management, specifically identity governance, and even going even deeper into that, an AI-driven identity governance solution to act as that central glue, if you will, that binds all of these security and IT investments together. And as well as another benefit of that is being able to share the identity-related information amongst the solution. So, because really, when it comes down to it, if you look at the cyber criminals, they all have different specialties and such, and they band together to break in and do what they do. Well, IT vendors, security vendors, we should be looking at doing that, and we should be doing that for organizations, and organizations should be taking advantage of that. Dare I say it, like takes a village, right? And so working together to be able to protect those infrastructures is really key, and being able to communicate with one another is really important. So another way I like to look at it when it comes to identity is I relate it this way. In your body, you have all sorts of like your organs and systems and processes and such. And part of that is your central nervous system. That includes your brain and all the nerves that extend out to every region of your body. So identity, specifically identity governance, is like a central nervous system for your IT environment. Especially when you're using AI and machine learning, when you're applying those, identity then becomes not only super aware, but also super responsive and open with the other systems and applications, those IT and security applications that support and connect your infrastructure. So A great example of how this might manifest would be like what we're seeing a lot of, and it's been an increase since COVID hit, was spear phishing attacks. That's, if you look at the stats, it's completely hockey sticked over the past 4 months due to cybercriminals now starting to double down on inundating your users with malicious emails to compromise credentials and gain entry. So you may have an email security solution in place. So for instance, like Proofpoint, for instance, to help you scan and catch those pesky emails that cause trouble. But when you couple that with like an identity governance solution, you then have this new dynamic that's possible. And so what that would look like is you could have your email security app trigger your identity solution. So when a user accidentally clicks that malicious link, and now you can have your identity solution be immediately responsive because there's a trigger that communicates, let's say from Proofpoint, that communicates that, whoa, this person clicked this link. And so your identity solution can then immediately cut off all access or force a password reset or whatever it may be that your teams feel like is necessary, but to protect you. So these safety nets are really crucial because, you know, staying on top of all of the activity that's happening, and, you know, especially now with remote workers, it's going to be challenging. So getting everything to communicate is going to help give you more coverage.
So Jackie, another question then. What concerns you the most relating to the remote worker and what the results are telling you? And also, I mean, what do you think the results are not telling us?
So these findings don't surprise me. And going back to what I just said, these data points are, they are all connected. Most organizations like to start their identity efforts with single sign-on and MFA, especially with the remote worker situation that we've been seeing. But what organizations eventually realize is that their identity program needs to go beyond that because it really requires a deep level of insight and control using policies and rule-based access controls. And so that way, if someone is changing jobs or they're leaving the company, all of that access is immediately adjusted, whether it's needing to be revoked or just updated. But the question is, you know, the one thing that really was calling out to me is the challenges that they're having with managing, you know, the poor management of accounts with regards to orphaned accounts and over-entitled identities, inconsistent access policies across the business units, and then also finding that the risk. That's, you know, that's really where identity comes into play. And if you start incorporating AI-driven identity, it makes it so much easier because finding an orphaned account is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. So, and these are the things that come back to bite you, especially if you've terminated an employee and their account is still active, which happens more often than people realize. Those are the doors you have to be careful with. And so that's where AI can really come into play to correlate and find all of those needles, if you will, and bring them to the surface. So that way you can go straight to those accounts and remediate those. And when it comes to policies, that's where AI and machine learning really comes into play as well, because it starts to identify and adapt to the way that your access behaviors are happening throughout your organization. And so when you've had a merger or acquisition or a divestiture, or let's say even a reorganization, your policies should get updated. And that's, you know, one area where organizations need to start looking a little bit deeper into is, you know, how do my policies, how should they be evolving and changing? You don't just set it and forget it. They need to change as your organization changes. And that's where an AI approach definitely is helpful.
Very good, thank you. Okay, and then just to conclude, one last question. Based on the findings, what should security professionals focus on relating to identity governance?
Well, you know, I would call out that identity has become primary and foundational to any security program. With cyber criminals targeting your workers and software bots to gain entry, the perimeter really has moved from the outer edges of the network to now each individual in the organization. So you can think of identity as the, dare I say, the new firewall. And at the core of that, keeping things secure is all about ensuring the right people have access to the right resources, regardless if those resources are in the cloud or on-prem. And because identity controls and captures all that access activity, I started to see it as, like I mentioned, the central nervous system before and how it connects everything together. But in fact, when you start to connect these, the other thing to mention was that you get a lot more value out of your investments. And with AI-driven identity, because it's capturing all the access activity happening, you've got most organizations are short-staffed when it comes to IT and security professionals, not only being able to find them, but also to retain them. And they always have too much to do. So really protecting your infrastructure comes down to how can we offload the mundane activities and give that to the machine, give that to the AI. And how can you have that AI and machine learning serve you? So that way your investments in your staff, you can use them for what you hope that you hired them for, and is that their creativity and intelligence to be able to make decisions. And so being able to spot risk, being able to find those needles in the haystack that could come back to bite you, that is the type of, that's really what I would tell security and IT professionals to start looking at identity for, is not only just finding the risk, but automating, getting stuff off of their plates that they don't necessarily need to do. And in turn, their workers are going to find that there's less friction because there's that balance of productivity and security. And how can I imply more security, but then it sometimes hinders the productivity side. And identity really is a great framework to create that environment where you can give self-service to your end users. Let them have self-service access and password management, taking that off your help desk, which saves costs, but then also gives each user the guardrails that they need to be able to do their work, knowing that they only have the least amount of access needed to successfully do their jobs.
Well, Jackie, thank you so much for your again, your input there. I think there was some fascinating findings there. Thank you for your analysis. That was Jackie Brinkerhoff, who's the Senior Director of Product Marketing at SailPoint. I also want to thank all of our attendees for taking time out of their day to attend this session. I trust that today's discussion provided some valuable insight on work from home, identity and access governance, and data breach risks. We hope to see you again at one of our upcoming events. For Information Security Media Group, I'm Nick Holland.